Hello once again, this is Patrick Hickey from Borbury Comprehensive School, and in this lesson I'm going to look at Anglo-Irish relations from 1922 to 1932. In other words, how relations developed under Cosgrave's government with Britain. But first things first, I just want to say a few things about exam questions that concern Anglo-Irish relations. As you're about to find out, it is a big topic. It's doable, but it can be a challenging question. Now, let's look at this example. Describe Anglo-Irish relations from 1922 to 1939. I would consider this a nice question. Again, you're dealing with two governments, Cumann from 22 to 32, Fianna Fáil from 32 to 39. Again, it's very doable. It's a nice contained type of question. Once more, this is a question I'd be happy with. Describe Anglo-Irish relations from 1932 to 1949. A nice question because really you're mainly focusing on Fianna Fáil and a little bit on the inter-party government that followed. Again, another nice question. What were the strengths and weaknesses of Cosgrave and or Dev's governments? Again, I'm a big fan of these and or questions. Again, they give students a lot of scope. But then again, if you just picked one option, say Cosgrave, on one hand, you could argue, I suppose, from what you'll see here, that in terms of Anglo-Irish relations, this would be considered a strength of his. Maybe there is a weakness in that as well. Certainly a big weakness of Cosgrave's government was his economic policy, which I dealt with in a previous lesson. So nothing to be too worried about there, I would think. And then there is this, the question I would dread on this topic. Now, it came up in 2007. How did Anglo-Irish relations develop from 1923 to 1949? Again, I'm not a fan. I suppose if you look at the date parameters of the question, it's massive. From 1923 to 1949. That's over 25 years of history, and they expect you to cover that in 40 minutes. Nearly impossible to do. Because I suppose if you're going to do this question, like this picture here, you have a long road ahead of you. And I think given the time constraints of the exam, there's no guarantee you will get to the end point. Therefore, this kind of question, where there is such a wide scope, right, where there is so much time involved, I would be inclined to avoid, maybe look elsewhere on the paper. Now, don't let any of this put you off, however. The good news here is I would consider Anglo-Irish relations to be a great topic. The content is interesting, and I think any student should know or should understand how we went from being a dominion at the start of this to ultimately a republic in 1949. So we're now going to start on that journey. So let's begin. Now, the way I'm going to approach this is I'm going to make 3 videos. This one is going to be on Cumann and Anglo-Irish relations from 1922 to 32. Then I will move on to Fianna Fáil from 1933 to 1939. And in my final lesson, I will look at World War II and its aftermath. Again, that will take us up to the point where Ireland becomes a republic. So, let's look at Cumann from 1922 to 1932. Now, what we will see with Cumann is they were determined to stay on good terms with Britain, its main trading partner and our closest neighbour. However, they did at times manage to assert an independent line. So, examples of staying on good terms with Britain. Well, firstly, they fully honoured the terms of the treaty. Number 2, they continued free trade. And number 3, they continued paying the land annuities. However, Cumann at times flexed its muscle and showed they were not just a dominion of Britain, they could do their own thing. Example of this would include: number 1, joining the League of Nations, unlike the other British dominions. Number 2, registering the Anglo-Irish Treaty as an international agreement with the League. And, wait for it, above all, Cosgrave sent Irish diplomats to the United States, the Vatican, France, and Germany, despite British opposition. The British government were not happy with this move. This for me is a real wow moment, and not to be underestimated. Ireland was the first dominion to appoint a diplomatic representative independent of Britain. Why did Cosgrave do it? Well, he wanted to prove that the Free State was independent and not just a dominion that towed the British line. In other words, we could do our own thing. And I suppose he also wanted to prove Michael Collins's point that the treaty was a stepping stone to fuller independence. Now, on the downside, I suppose Cuman's main failure in terms of Anglo-Irish relations was its poor handling of the Boundary Commission. Now, the Boundary Commission was one of the terms of the Anglo-Irish Treaty, and it was intended that it would refix the border between the north and south. Now, the plan was it should have been set up nearly immediately after the signing of the treaty. However, as a result of the Civil War, the Commission was unable to do its job until 1924. Now, when it eventually did come together, the Commission included one member from each of the interested parties. A judge, Justice Richard Feetham from South Africa, represented Britain. The Free State's Minister for Education, Owen MacNeill, represented the South, and Joseph Fisher for Northern Ireland. Actually, Fisher had to be appointed by the British government because James Craig, the then Northern Ireland Prime Minister, refused to cooperate. Now, the Free State government were wrongly confident of substantial territorial concessions. I suppose this had started with the impression Lloyd George had given them day one about the Boundary Commission. Many in the Free State believed large areas of the north, even its second city, Derry, would be transferred to the south as a result of the Boundary Commission. As a result, Northern Ireland would not be economically viable. It just couldn't exist on its own. It would be so small, just a stump of a state, and would eventually opt for union with the rest of Ireland. However, in November 1925, that belief was shattered by a tabloid newspaper, the Morning Post's revelation of a two-way transfer of territory. Yes, a two-way transfer. This had never been on the cards. It was always anticipated that the only territory moving would be from north to south and not in the other direction. The leaked report included accurately the Boundary Commission's recommendation that parts of East Donegal would be transferred to Northern Ireland. For Cosgrave, it would be a diplomatic disaster. In desperation, he flew to London for an urgent meeting with the then British Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin. They cut a deal. The border would remain unchanged. Ireland, however, would be absolved of the responsibility of paying its World War I debt. Cosgrave also requested that the terms of the agreement not be published. They were anyway. So he wasn't that happy with that. I suppose, all told, it was a very sad moment in Irish history. Cosgrave had unwittingly strengthened partition between North and South. And I suppose the border will remain as it is from then to now. But we will finish Cumann and Nail's Anglo-Irish relations on a high. Their main success in terms of Anglo-Irish relations was the Statute of Westminster, which was signed in 1931. Now, this might be the first time you've ever heard of the Statute of Westminster, but it is a big deal. Especially in Canada. Again, if you look at these examples here, I think it was in 2011, Canada made a big deal of the anniversary of the statute. Again, another image here I got. It says here, in terms of Canada's attitude to it, the Statute of Westminster was a significant milestone in Canada's evolution as an independent nation. Now, where did it come from? Well, Kevin O'Higgins, a man we came across before when we were looking at state building in the Free State, he actually laid the foundations for this, when in 1926 he got the British government to issue what was called the Balfour Declaration. This stated, the Dominions, the likes of ourselves, Australia, New Zealand and Canada, were autonomous communities within the British Empire, equal in status. And I suppose the key word here is equal, right? No longer will the Dominions be subservient to Britain. All Dominions, thanks to Irish efforts, could from now on pass laws without British interference. And number two, revoke, actually get rid of previous British laws made for that Dominion. So in theory, Cumann and Nail can get rid of the treaty. The British can't stop them. But they didn't. Cumann and Nail didn't do anything with the statute. And maybe they couldn't. Because we have to remember, it wasn't that long ago that Cosgrave had won a civil war defending the treaty. How would it look now if he started to get rid of it or dismantle it? But of course, all will change in 1932 when Cumann and Nail lose office, and Dev and Fianna Fáil will come to power and of course take full advantage of the Statute of Westminster. And that's where I'll pick it up in our next lesson or next video. We'll see how that developed. Okay, so once again, thanks for watching. I hope these videos are of help and are keeping you on track for your Leaving Cert. Till next time, bye bye.